Namanda, 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 Namanda. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our March Shotsuki Hoyo monthly memorial and adult Dharma service. I would like to begin by reading the names of those who've passed away in the month of March. Genmatsu Aikawa, Shizuko Aikawa, Larry Choi, Sadajiro Fuji, Motojiro Fukuda, Garrett Gluck, Kiichi Richard Goto, Masato Hashimoto, Reverend Akira Hata, Catherine Fumiko Hata, Ryokichi Hayashida, Shizue Hirabayashi, Ayako Hirai, Asano Hirota, Tom Honda, Edward Tatsuo Hori, Jitsuo Horimoto, David Hoshide, Juntaro Ichikawa, Agnes Ide, Shigeko Ide, Unoe Inouchi, Kotoku Inoue, Ryohei Inoue, Deborah Ishida, Beverly Ishizu, Yoshio Isono, Sukejiro Kamano, Masame Kanagaki, Heiji Kano, Raymond Kano, Tsutomu Kasai, Umeo Kasai, Fujio Kataoka, Yohei Kataoka, Sue Kawabata, Tsuru Kawabata, Hideko Kida, Martha Kido, Jutaro Kubota, James Kurata, Umejiro Kuritsubo, Kyoko Kuwahara, Nancy Kuwahara, Shigeki Kuwahara, Osami Sam Maruyama, Reverend Kenyu Masuyama, Kojiro Matsui, Tayo Matsui, Henry Matsutani Jr., Hagino Matsuoka, Minoru Matsumoto, Tarobe Minamidani, Kame Mitsuda, Kohei Miyamoto, Masato Miyamura, Kyoko Mizuki, Masao Mori, Yoshimatsu Mori, Seiichiro Morimoto, Matsue Morishita, Tayo Morishita, Misao Murakawa, Toshio Murakawa, Zenkichi Murakawa, Reverend Gyosei Nagafuji, Yoko Nagafuji, Hatsu Nakai, Junji Nakashima, George Nakatani, Tsuneko Nakatani, Yasutaro Nakatani, Henry Natsuhara, Alexander Nagoro, Michiko Nehira, Hiroshi Neishi, Mitsugi Neishi, Kyoichi Nobori, Masami Nobori, Joan Nomura, Tarashi Nomura, Sueko Norimoto, Ohata Family, Sadao Okai, Misao Okano, Fujio Okawa, Shigenobu Okawachi, Joe Okumura, Masai Onizuka, Kei Ota, Ryuichi Otaguro, Baiseki Otsuka, Asataro Otsuka, Shigeru Sakaki, Kichimatsu Satake, Minoru Satake, Misao Satake, Shokichi Satake, Tetsuo Shigaya, Frank Shimamoto, Zenichi Shimamoto, Shizuko Shiroyama, Bennosuke Sugiyama, Shin Takahashi, Jeffrey Takagaki, Ishii Takata, Masue Tanaka, Suekio Tanisawa, Matsuyo Toji, Unkichi Toyofuku, Isoko Umeki, Sadato Ushijima, Jintaro Yamamoto, Saikichi Yamamoto, Shigeru Yamamoto, Yoshizo Yamamoto, Yukie Yamamoto, Sono Yamashita, William Yamazaki LaRue, Motoichi Yanagi, Totaro Yokoi, Tane Yokoi, Eisaku Yoshida, Haruno Yoshioka, Tsurue Yoshisato, Fusako Yuto, Jitsuyo Yuto, Kayoko Yuto. Next, we will have Sutra chanting. We will all chant together. We used to do incense offering during the chanting, but we're not doing that now. So we will be chanting Sanbutsuge, which is on page 22 in the small purple book. And raise your hand if you need a book, but I think everyone should be okay. Namanda, 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 namanda.日が妻に主公変容開室音平有脈樹木如来予言朝鮮無林小学大音コル実法開門精進三昧知恵意徳無量主所敬人体前年諸仏崩壊愚人人の空語外体無明欲ぬ世尊読む人の死死人徳無量空君古代知恵人妙光明一層神道大仙願が差仏在所法可動生じ未不下脱不正常意解任精進如是三昧知恵以上五世特仏不行志願一切空空一切大安決し有仏百千億万無量大小衆如五者供養一切使徒諸仏不如愚道賢聖不客非如五者諸仏世界不不可け無種節道光明師匠変師諸国如是精進異人難量
Ryoga Sabutsu Kokudo Daiichi Goshu Kimyo Dojo Chozetsu Kokunyo Naion Nimu Toso Gato Aimin Dodatsu Isai Jippo Raisho Shinetsu Shoujo Ito Gakok Keraku Anom Kobutsu Shinmyo Zega Shinsho Hotsugan no Hi Riki Shoshoyok Jippo Sesom Chiemuge Jonyo Shisom Chiga Shinyo Keryo Shinshi Shoku Dokuchu Gagyo Shojin Ninju Fuke
And I know that some of you here were here already this morning, but let's recite the three treasures, which is on page 3 in the small purple book. The three treasures. Hard is it to be born into human life, now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the Buddha Dharma, now we hear it. If we do not deliver ourselves in the present life, no hope is there that we shall be freed from suffering and sorrow in the ocean of birth and death. Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in Buddha. May we all together absorb into ourselves the principle of your way to enlightenment and awaken in ourselves your supreme will. I take refuge in Dharma. May we all together be submerged in the depth of the doctrine and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. I take refuge in Sangha. May we all together become units in true accord, in your life of harmony, in a spirit of universal oneness, freed from the bondage of selfishness. Even through myriad ages of kalpas, hard is it to hear such an excellent, profound, and wonderful doctrine. Now we are able to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of the Tathagata's teaching. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Gamanda. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to deliver the Dharma message for today's March Shotsuki memorial service, our monthly memorial service. One thing I realized, I was reading that list of names, and what I've been doing is putting it on my, I used to print it out, right? And I had the piece of paper and have to, it was kind of hard because you have to get the paper up for my eyes. I have trifocals now, so you have to have it in the right position and everything. But I realized I can make a PDF and put it on my screen, right? And I can move it on the screen. I don't have to move my head around. So that helps. And I was reading it, and it's part way through, I think I kind of caught myself thinking, oh, I'm doing a good job, right? Pronouncing the names. So of course, that's when I mess up. Right? And it was just so interesting, right? Like trying to focus, trying to read the names properly. It's not easy, right? Each one coming up, and Japanese names and sometimes not Japanese names. And but I still think I did pretty well. But here I go again. If you're here in the earlier service, honoring myself, right? Impressed with myself. Hey, I did a pretty good job reading the names, right? So those are the kind of thoughts that go through my head sometimes when, doing something, trying to do this task, right, of reading the Shotsuki names. But I do like to try and read them as best I can. It's difficult to do it perfectly, but I really think that Shotsuki is such a wonderful tradition that we have, right, to honor these people each year, right, when it's their month, come up, and be able to read these names out. Now, this morning, I talked about someone named Vasubandhu, who is one of the 7 masters of our school. He's really important in Mahayana Buddhism. He's the founder of what's known as the mind-only school. And it's a difficult doctrine, but there's an insight that I'd like to talk about that I've talked about before, not recently. And I think sometimes Buddhist philosophy seems to say, this world, samsara, the stuff we think is real, the people we think are real, the me that I think is real, it's all illusion. That's a mistaken, diluted view, right? That it's all illusory. When we chant Junirai, which we don't chant so much, it says, everything is like a flash of lightning or like the drops of dew, right? Which in one sense implies impermanence, but another sense, I think sometimes it gets taken even further to just point to the absolute non-reality of our world. The true reality, right? So the reality I think is real is actually not real. It's maybe even false. The true reality is nirvana, Buddha, Namo Amida Butsu, right? There's different, the true thusness. There's all these different words we could take for the ultimate truth, this true reality. So in that view, it's just our mistaken reality and the true reality. Now, what Yogacara does, I think it calls the mistaken reality the imagined nature. So everything has an imagined nature. I think it's real, but it's actually my imagination. And then the perfected or the consummate nature, that's the true reality, which is empty, which is another whole Buddhist thing, right? But this true thusness, emptiness, it's all one. That's another mistake we make, is thinking there's a difference between you and me, right? That there's all these distinctions. The true wisdom is this wisdom of non-discrimination. It's actually all one. This true reality pervades all things. And there's actually no distinctions, no things to discern, no beings to discern. So that's the imagined nature and the perfected nature, right? So that kind of diluted reality and true reality. What's cool about mind-only school is they introduce a third nature, the dependent nature, or we might call it the other dependent nature. Okay, so in addition to this imagined nature of things and the true, empty, nirvanic aspect of things, there's also an other dependent nature. So it acknowledges that within this samsaric world we have, it's less worried about objective reality and much more concerned with what we might call subjective perception. Okay, so, I think we are familiar with those terms, at least objective and subjective, right? In our society where science is really important, and I'm not a science denier by any means, but the scientific view is very objective, right? We can measure it. We can take anything and we can measure it. We can perform experiments, right? And if we perform the same experiment 2, 3, 4 times, we can start to think, okay, yeah, this seems to be the way things are. Right? We can make formulas. So we have these measurements. We have this objective understanding of reality. Subjective is me as the subject, and the objective is the object I'm looking at. Right? So I can take this object, which in this case is a pen, right? And objectively, we can say it's a black pen with a red cap. We could break it down to its chemistry, right? The molecules that it's made up of, the red pen ink. We can go as far as we want to objectively measure it. But that doesn't bring into account the subject, the measurer, right? The person perceiving the object. And so Yogacara kind of says it's important. The perceiver is important. So when I see this pen, I don't necessarily see it as a pure scientific object. I see it as, oh, why did I put this pen up here? Right? I don't need a red pen. I can't see the red ink up here without a special light. So I need to have a black pen. I don't like this pen. I don't want this pen here. This pen is for something else. All these judgments, value judgments about the pen, right? So as from one objective perspective, it's just a pen, right? But from a subjective perspective, it has all kinds of different values, right? Actually, I kind of like these kinds of pens. I'm just using that as an example, right? This is the Sharpie, so it has a nice sharp point. But there we go again. Another value judgment. Actually, I like this pen. Actually, it's a great pen. Maybe it's one of my favorite pens. And the reason I'm upset is because it's up here and it should be down in my office where I need it, right? So we went from this pure scientific object to the object of scorn and desire from the subject, from me, this subjective view of the pen. My perception of reality is extremely subjective. Right? And I think that's a big point that Yogacara, this mind-only school, wants to make, that I don't see things as they are. I don't see things in their true, just objective kind of existence. I can only see them from my subjective point of view. And usually I'm not thinking that way. Usually I'm like, yeah, come on, these pens are great, right? But not realizing, wait a second, that's my perspective. That's my feeling on this, my subjective perspective. The other thing I like about it is that I'm needed for this pen to truly be a pen, right? If it's just a pen sitting in a box, it's waiting for someone to come along and use it, but if it never gets used, what a waste, right? This poor pen. How many pens do we make each year? One of my favorite shows is How It's Made. It's on the Science Channel. I don't know if you've ever watched that show, but it's a Canadian show. And every episode they show 3 things and how it's made, how they make it. And they go to the factory or they show the craftspeople making. They do food. They do all kinds of stuff, right? But a lot of times in those, or another one is Unwrapped on the Food Channel, right? Where they show how they make different kinds of food. And a lot of times what they'll say is, every year, this factory produces 500,000 of these each day. Each day, maybe they make 500,000, right? So in a year, they make enough to wrap around the world 5 times, right? And they say it like it's a good thing. But sometimes it's like, really? Do we need all this stuff? right? Do we really need to proliferate this stuff just in case someone needs it? When a lot of times it ends up getting thrown out, especially if it's food, right? And all this extra stuff we make, all this stuff that lines the supermarket shopping, shelves and everything, you know, subjectively, maybe we can look at it and it's kind of sad sometimes, right? To think, wow, all this stuff and all this food getting thrown away. But this other dependent nature, dependent on others, acknowledging this relationship. So that's back to Shotsuki. That's one of the things I like about it, And so one aspect of Shotsuki is it's wonderful that you are here, right? It's wonderful. And I know some of you are here specifically for Shotsuki, for a certain person or people, right? And sometimes as I'm reading the name, I'm thinking, who's here? Who am I reading, right? Why are they here? Which people on the list, right? And so there's that special connection between you and someone on our list, right? Someone who has passed away, who was a member of the church or, a member connected to the church, right? And a member of your family. But not everyone on the list has someone here, right? Either they can't make it, maybe they don't live nearby. That was one of the neat things about the pandemic and when we started streaming the services. And I got an email from someone saying, I've been getting the Shotsuki notification card for years for whoever, my father or grandfather or something. I had no idea what Shotsuki was. I didn't know what you did. I didn't know what it was like, right? Now I know. I've been able to see it on the internet, right? Now I understand what the Shotsuki is. And so isn't that interesting? For most of you, you're like, Shotsuki, I know what that is, right? But some of these people, someone can't come because they don't live even in California. Some of the people, I think, may not have any living relatives at all. But to me, it's kind of really cool to think, wow, I'm reading their name. This is maybe the one time this name gets said each year. There may not be anyone left to remember them, right? They passed away 100 years ago, maybe, and they don't have any surviving family, right? So nobody thinks about them. Nobody, right? Nobody places flowers at the grave or the urn, right? And yet their name is read at Shotsuki. And so by me reading it, right, this other dependent, right, it's a way to acknowledge them. In a way, they come back to life again, right? That they're who they are, right, is acknowledged at this service. So even more so for you who are here, right? How special it is, how important it is to be able to come, right? Remember them. If you're lucky, you have family you can gather with, right? That's not a given either, right? Especially people move away and everything. So just really, really special opportunity to remember these people. I think also, I was thinking about a friend who has not passed away, but when I first moved back home about 20 years ago now, because my parents had passed away, so I had to deal with the house, I had to sell the house, and then I had to go to Japan to go study further to become a minister, right? And so I went to visit a friend from college, and we had lunch, and he was with his, I don't forget if she was fiance at that point or wife, and so we had brunch together, and I don't know. I thought I was kind of a jerk at brunch. Like we were talking about something and I was kind of contradicting what he was saying and I just couldn't let it go. And I kept contradicting it. I'm not going to tell you the story. It's going to go too long, but just at the end, I was like, why did I do that? Why did I have to stick to my opinion? Why couldn't I have just let it go and let him have his word, right? And not insist on my word. I didn't talk to the guy for like 10, 15 years because I was upset. Right? Because I felt like maybe I'd upset him. Right? And 10, 15 years later, he came out to San Francisco for a conference because he was out here. He's a philosophy professor in Massachusetts. And he came out for a conference and contacted me. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, let's get together. And it was like old times. You didn't care. I apologize. He's like, what are you talking about? Imagined nature. mistaken view of reality. In a way, I can say, at least I was thinking about him and his feelings afterwards, right? But it was still mistaken, right? It was still my imagined view of what happened, right? And I was fortunate that he reached out, right? So that 10, 15 years later, we were able to, from my perspective, patch up the relationship. From his, there was no problem to begin with. So we were able to renew the friendship, right? So that, that's another aspect of these services, I think. Maybe especially first year, third year, seventh year, the special memorials we do. Impermanence, things change, our feelings change. I believe our relationship continues with people even after they pass, right? And so even that relationship continues to change. And maybe my perception of the past can change too, right? So that I don't cling to, I could have clung to this distress that I had hurt my friend and be like, oh my gosh, no, I can't talk to him. Sorry, I'm busy. I could have really clung to that feeling of distress and worry. But instead, I just tried to let it go. And I did apologize too, right? And he was just like, what? What are you talking about? But I was able to at least address it and clear the air. Right? And so we can't always do that, right? With those who are have passed away. But you know what? I think it's okay. I understand that they're actually Buddhas now, right? The people whose names we read on the list are Buddha. So they're actually still here teaching us. So if I'm able to work through some aspect of my relationship, I can think about, relationship with my parents, for example, right? And it changes still over time, and I'm able to understand them better as time passes, right? I'm able to better understand my relationship with them as time passes, right? And as I gain deeper insight into myself. So that's really, to me, such an important part of these memorials. This opportunity to make special effort to think about them. Right? This opportunity to think about them again, to hear their name read, to gather with family if you can, right? And if you can, to talk about them, right? Remember, bring them to mind, especially if it's their Shotsuki, right? Think about stuff they did. Think about the impact they had on you. That's one of the biggest things, right? This impact that they had. Realize how much love and care came, even if I wasn't aware of it before. So on this special occasion, because the Shotsuki, as much as in the West, I think death and loss are considered a negative thing. But in Buddhism, as much as we acknowledge sadness, as much as we acknowledge those aspects of death, it's also a bigger picture, right? And it's maybe this is an opportunity, right? That's maybe a Buddhist way to see it, as an opportunity for reflection, opportunity for connection now with those who remain, opportunity for reflection on myself and how I live my life, right? And they continue to impact us in that way. So I'd like to thank you for joining us for this March Shotsuki monthly memorial service and adult Dharma service, thinking about this teaching of mind only, right? And thinking about how important these connections are, this other dependent nature, right? Realizing it's not just about me, it's not just objective reality, it's this deep, deep connection between all of us. So please join me in Gassho as we conclude with Gassho with Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namam Nams. And that was just concluding the Dharma talk. Why don't we sing Ondokusan II, which you may have memorized, but if you don't, it's on page 76 in the small purple book. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda, namanda. Okay, thank you. Really briefly, next week there will not be live service here because I and most everyone else is going to be in Palo Alto for the special 850th anniversary of Shinran's birth, 800th anniversary of Jodo Shinshu. But we will have the temple open, so you can come if you want, and we'll have the screen here, and you can watch the stream of that service. The following weekend is Ohigan, and it's also the Oakland Running Festival. So we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do. We may just do an online service because I'm just concerned about the impact of the traffic. So keep an eye out for an email about that. And then April 2nd, the first Sunday in April, is going to be Hanamatsuri. And so we'll have our Dharma school here and our special guest speaker, Reverend Kodo Umezu. And it'll be, our service, and then it's going to be pretty laid back, but we'd also like to have just kind of a reception kind of thing with refreshments to be able to honor Reverend Umezu, because he was no longer bishop back in 2020 in February or March, and he also retired, and then the pandemic hit, so we never got to give him a party. So this will be our chance to honor Reverend Umezu, so please come to that if you can. Okay, thank you very much. Let's conclude one more time with Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Namanda. Okay, thank you. That'll conclude service. Bye everybody online.